House, and we are pleased to be joined by Lieutenant Governor Delbert Hosemann this morning. This is the Gallo Radio Show on SuperTalk, Mississippi. Lance, are we good to go?
Good to go, sir.
All right, there we go. Lieutenant Governor Hosemann, good morning to you. I trust that you and your family had a great holiday season, and we appreciate the time.
Absolutely, and it's good to see you or hear you. I can see you over on the screen and hear you as well.
I apologize for not being there in person. We'll try and rectify that for the next conversation. As we have led to the start of this new legislative session, and we have visited with different legislators on the House side and the Senate side, everybody's got priorities. And a lot of those priorities, I think, are driven by committee assignments and just where an individual legislator's focus is most of the time. You don't have the luxury of being locked in on just a single issue. So in terms of priorities going into this session, what's your checklist, or at least, top 3 or 4?
Well, we only have a half an hour, so I'll be able to get through them all.
I have more than just that question, by the way.
Okay, well, let's start with that one. We have a 3 or 4, I think, critical issues. We want to reduce people's taxes again. We've been doing that, and it's an amazing thing. People seem to forget a little bit about how far we've come with that. We're paying off about $38 million a year. We've reduced the franchise tax for businesses, and during my last 5 years here, we'll do almost $200 million of reduction of business taxes, franchise taxes. And in addition to that, we cut the 5% rate, 3% rate. We're cutting it every year down, 4.7, 4.4, and we're going to 4%. And we'll cut about $525 million annual decrease in income tax for Mississippians. And in addition to that, we're proposing to decrease the grocery tax from 7% to 5%. That's about $126 million a year. So when you add all of that up over a term, we're talking literally $1 billion a year in tax reduction, and I want to continue that in an organized way. We're moving towards elimination of the income tax, and we're doing it in the appropriate way. We plan to go and propose to go to 3%. This through the next 4 years.
Let me interrupt just for a second there, because I want to underscore that, because that's what struck me the last time you and I visited. We were at Hobnob, and I had Speaker White on, and we had talked about that, and he was talking about elimination of the income tax, and you said the exact same thing. We are working toward the elimination of the personal income tax in Mississippi, and I walked away from that day going, okay, the Speaker and the Lieutenant Governor don't appear to be nearly as far apart on this issue as a lot of people think, or as it's been publicly portrayed. So what is the difference of opinion if both of you are talking about an incremental walk toward the removal of the income tax?
Well, I don't know that there is a difference. The way that we propose to do it, or I've proposed to do it, is in an organized way that is achievable. Instead of coming up with some shell game or some other way we're going to move these or whatever, we are doing meticulously every year cutting the income tax. And over the next 10 years or so, it'll be eliminated. And we do that with view that people expect us to fix the roads. They expect us to pay the teachers. They expect us to have a judiciary, highway patrol, whatever, all the other things that people require us to do. We can do that by doing several different matters. For example, simultaneous with this, we have reduced the number of state employees since I started by over 1,000. And we're going through the next 3 years, we intend to reduce them by another 1,000 through attrition and retirement and whatnot. We're just not rehiring. So we're cutting our expenses so that we can cut our taxes. And I know that may be a novel idea in Washington, but it's not with me. So that's what we're doing. And if you look at this across the board, it's very important, I think, Richard, that we have a balanced tax system. We don't want to put all our money on the grocery tax, or all our money on the sales tax, or all our money on the income tax, or all our money on the franchise tax. We need to have a balanced system where if people quit, for example, buying a lot of things, we go into a horrible depression, our sales tax would collapse. So we don't want to rely just on sales tax. Mm-hmm. And so you go through, we have a very stable platform for taxation, and then we're reducing it in every area. I mean, every area we can. So I'm real pleased that the legislature's come to this conclusion, and that we don't go off the rails with something nobody understands, and yet we do it in a methodical, conservative, fiscal, responsible way to do it. And that's
so is the difference that, and forgive me if this is a bad question, that the House side wants to codify it and make it law, and with the reductions that you've done, you've said, I promise that we're going to do this, and then have followed through on what you've promised, but not necessarily saying, okay, we're going to do this, and this is the timetable. It will go down 0.5% each year for the next 6 years or 8 years or 10 years, whatever the math is to get you to the finish line. Do I hear you saying, we're going to do this, but we're only going to do it as we can afford it? We're not going to promise to do something that we might not be able to afford down the line?
Yeah, incrementally. By doing it incrementally, at some point we may have a uptime in which the legislature says, "Whoa, we've had a horrible hurricane. We've had to spend a lot of money this year. We can't reduce it." That kind of thing. That I want to leave. I'm here another 3 years. I don't want to burden some other governor and lieutenant governor and Senate and House with the fact they've got some mandatory and they can't do that. So by doing it incrementally like this, we give stops in here and provide bumpers to make sure that we can afford those as we go along. And you're right. I'm taking the other side by decreasing expenses to make sure we can afford them. And so that's what's happening with us. And I think that makes sense. 3 years from now, who knows what will be happening with tariffs, all the other things that are going on. And I would remind you that last month we were below budget by $108 million. So these things happen during this period. Most of that is corporate income tax. I'll get into that if you want to get into it. But in any event, for the year, we were down actually $134 million, but for the year we're $100 million down. So that's kind of a blinking yellow light for us to say, look, we want to continue our taxes, but make sure that we're paying attention to what's going on in our state. And so I'm thinking out the next 3 and 4 years right now, and I've been working hard on a budget the last couple of months, doing a projection for 3 years, and we can absorb this with somewhere about between 0.5% and 1% annual growth in our, and then also watching our expenses. So I've been doing a kind of a state budget, I guess.
And historically, aren't we at about 2% annual growth on the budget?
It's been running about 1.5, between 1.5 and 2. Richard, you're close. And the my thought about that is I hate to overproject that kind of thing. Historically, we would have been a little bit better, so I've got some wiggle room there, I think. So I projected our growth at 1% when I was doing my calculations, and it still worked with the cutting the grocery tax and the income tax like we're proposing.
Visiting with Delbert Hosemann, Lieutenant Governor here in the state of Mississippi. Officially yesterday, the new session began. I guess maybe I don't know that there's ever a final question in this conversation about the tax debate.
No, there's
but
a lot
the governor
of moving parts.
Was very strong yesterday in what he came out with, a post that he made on social media where he said, the number one goal for this Republican, talking about himself, is the complete elimination of the state income tax, and then he tagged a bunch of officials in that as well. Are you and the governor at odds over this?
No, I'm just getting there faster than he did. If you remember the old adage was that we're going to do this. The House had a proposal a couple of years ago. We're going to increase the sales tax to 9 or 9.5%, and then we're going to do this, and by 2036 or 2038 we'll have done away with the income tax. Well, I want to do away with the income tax, and I'm not raising anybody's taxes. And I'm doing it by having good, fiscal, responsible government. And the Senate and members of the Senate and members of the House have been voting on those, and we're doing it in an organized way. And if the governor, it's too bad he's term limited. If he just stay another 4 or 5 years, he could be there and sign the last bill.
We'll let that one hang just for a second. We've got a quick timeout, more with our conversation with the Lieutenant Governor, Delbert Hosemann, running the Senate as we move toward day 2 of the new session. Do you have a calendar on the wall where you tick the days off as it goes?
I don't, but somebody came and put on my door 89 more yesterday. So.
But who's counting?
Who's counting? We're having a great session. I've got great people. The Senate's great. We have new members coming. The House, we had a party at my house last night. A lot of the House showed up, and a lot of the senators, and we're just have a good spirit. Our team is ready to go, I think.
Quick time out. Back with you right after this. This is the Gallo Radio Show on SuperTalk, Mississippi. Welcome again, Gallo Radio Show, SuperTalk, Mississippi. Delbert Hosemann is our guest, Lieutenant Governor here in the Magnolia State. You weren't running around at the Capitol quite as much in 2012 when Steve Holland suggested that we rename the body of water to our south. I think he was joking when he said the Gulf of America.
He is a Mississippi, I don't know. Original Mississippi, and I want to tell you, he did this new movie up here about the guy that tried to kill the president and all that other kind of stuff. Yeah. So he's one of a kind. He is one of a kind. But
who knew that the president-elect was going to be borrowing his idea a little over a decade later, renaming the Gulf of Mexico?
There you go.
Delbert Hosemann with us this morning. We certainly could lock in and spend a lot of time on the tax conversation, but there are a couple of other things we certainly need to get to as well. There may not be an issue that gets people's dander up faster than when you start talking about retirement savings, PERS, the ability to fund what people believe they have saved and earned through the course of their working life. Projections have PERS not having enough to continue to make it in perpetuity, right?
Yes, and it was some shock, I think, to the legislature, to all of us down there, when we were told last year that we were $25 billion short in our retirement plan. And there's several different feelings right there. First of all, you worry about making sure the people that work here get their money, the retirees, and the people that are working here now get their retirement, and then how do we pay for it? It was just a real blow, I think. And so we did the right thing. The legislature required 2 new actuaries to be looking at how we got here. PERS kept their own actuary. I was chairman of the legislative budget group, and I hired an actuary. So between the 4 of us, we began meetings all year long about how can we get from where we are to where we want to be. Part of it was additional contributions, and we're going from 17 to 19 and 0.9% contributions. It's another $260 to $300 million worth of contributions that will go into the plan to bolster it. But also, critically, the plan provided for a 3% cost of living, mandatory cost of living requirement. That was running anywhere from $700 to $900 million a year additional funding. And when the Democrats did this, they never funded that. So we're getting stuck. So I just can't.
And if I can interject just for a second, the cost of living requirement is what so many, the 3% increase year over year is what most people refer to as the 13th check.
Right. That's correct. And
I just want to make sure people understand what we're talking about there.
Right.
Because that is of huge value. And for a lot of people, it's the reason that they stay on in government work,
That's correct.
work.
And so they used to work for a lot less money they're working now. Our average compensation, I talked to Kelly Hardwick the other day, is about $50,000 for workers here. And that used to be $15,000 or $20,000 cheaper at one point in time. So I began with a couple of things that I wanted for sure. One, we had to protect the retirees, make sure they got their benefit. They worked. We had a contract. I felt an obligation, a statutory obligation, and a moral obligation to pay them. Then my people that are working with me right now, they had signed on, and they deserve to have the benefit they signed on to paid for. So those were the 2 just absolutes for me. And when we came back, and I want to tell you this, Kelly Breland and Mr. Brewer, they were just icons in these negotiations with us and on the legislative side. And we did, I can't tell you how many proposals and how many things we looked at and whatnot. And we looked at the market too. This is really important. Like, what are people doing that are being hired today? So what we're going to do is that new employees will come under a new plan that will be actuarially sound. Now, that's a great step forward. All of the older employees and the retirees, the people that are working here today and the retirees, will keep their benefit just as it is today. The legislature will put in additional funds to pay on this liability that we hadn't paid for before. And new employees will come under an actuarially sound plan.
Okay.
And that plan cost about 9%, and we're going to put up about 19.9%. So the 10% difference there will go to pay for all of the obligations we have to our current employees and our retirees, and we'll be able to get the fund adequately funded for the future. Then in about 20 years or 25.
This is not entirely different than what a lot of industries have done, where they have gone away from pensions and have gone to 401k plans, right?
When I was in private practice, I terminated a whole bunch of defined benefit plans for this very reason, that they were growing and it was unable to fund them. So with the certain assumptions that we've got, we went forward with this plan. The other part, the new plan will have a part defined benefit plan, and of course we pay Social Security for our current employees. So they'll have a defined benefit plan for Social Security. They'll get their Social Security payment. Then they have a defined benefit plan from the state. Those two will add up to a significant portion, probably about 60% of what they're making when they retire. In addition to that, we're going to have a 401k plan, which is 5% a year for each one of these employees, and it will earn interest at 7, 8, or whatever, how much percentage last year was 11%.
Wait, so, when you say 5% a year, that's the state contribution to the 401k up to 5%?
That's correct. And then under a 401k, and most everybody out there that's working has one, you can add more money if your wife is doing really good or your husband's doing really good and you want to add some more money into it, you can add a deduction to it and increase your retirement benefit. But at 5%, it provides a tremendous benefit out 25 and 30 years. Hundreds of thousands of dollars will be available to our employees. So people out here that are doing 401ks, that's who our market, we're trying to recruit state employees against people who are doing 401ks. So now that 401k will be 100% vested from day one. So our new employees have to wait 8 years for a retirement benefit. That'll continue. Right. But your 401k plan, you walk out 2 years from now, you can take the $5,000 we put in there. So it's really a tremendous benefit. And then the board, to its credit, and sometimes you see so many competing interests and so much difficulty and so much talk, but the board adopted that resolution and sent it over about 2 weeks ago to the legislature, and I can't tell you how much Kelly and Bill and Mr. Higgins, that's our executive director, how hard they worked with the legislature to come up with a plan that will be viable and will get us out from under this. Richard,
will this pass in both houses?
Listen to this 1 second. In Illinois, because they haven't had the leadership to do this from all of these people, they pay 20% of their revenue for their pension plan. Okay. In Mississippi, that would be $1.4 billion. So we wouldn't have any tax cuts. We wouldn't be able to fund education. I mean, all of these things would or have to raise taxes, or there'd be a significant difference in the way that we conduct our government. So this step right here is historical and is an effort by a lot of different people. And I hope to adopt it quickly and get forward and make sure my retirees get their money and the current get their money, and then I have a viable, competitive plan for my future employees. And this will include, by the way, new people that come to the legislature. There won't be a slurp anymore. There won't be all these other different plans. The legislature will give a BITS plan. Everybody will go back to one plan. And I'm real proud of everybody contributed into this, and I'm real proud that they're getting to this point.
Do you believe that the House is on board with this plan also?
Well, I initially discussed that with them. They asked that we take, because I was a tax lawyer, they said, you take the lead and bring us what you can best work out so we don't go broke. And I think with us and the PERS board, I think we've come up with a plan that would be acceptable in the House as well.
How much does that happen, where you and the speaker say, all right, we're going to take the lead on this issue and we're going to hand it off to the Senate.
Yeah.
You guys on the Senate side, you take the lead on this, and then we'll hand it off to you in the House.
Well, most of the time it's the two chairmen, and sometimes it's a House bill, sometimes it's a Senate bill, but most of those interrelations are done at the chairman level. This particular one, I just happened to have some expertise in it and had worked on it, and in this particular instance, it was a huge, at $25 billion. We don't collect it at $7 billion a year, so we'd have to close the government for 4 years to make that up. So it was happened to be something that I had particular talent in, and sometimes there'll be particular talent on the other side that would take over an issue.
I know you wanted to get to education. You got time to hang for this last segment of the hour, or do you need to head to the Capitol?
The education, well, they don't show up till 10, but I'll be there early. But I do want to talk about education. We have some monumental changes in it as well, Richard, as well as some issues we need to discuss.
Let's do that on the other side of the break. Don't forget, you can send us messages. I see them, by the way, on the C Spire text line. 601-879-4395. We will get to some of those as well, if time permits. Visiting with Lieutenant Governor Delbert Hosemann. Kind enough to spend some time with us this morning on the Gallo Radio Show. Don't forget, you can always listen online at supertalk.fm and SuperTalk TV, and you can get it on the app. This segment is brought to you by Covington County Hospital in Collins, where your health matters. The Gallo Radio Show, SuperTalk, Mississippi. We are back right after this. Gallo Radio Show, Super Talk, Mississippi, Wednesday morning. Thanks for being with us on the 8th of January. It is cold, and we, for much of the state, are going to be under a winter storm watch. Or I guess the winter storm watch is in place and begins on Thursday evening and runs through Friday night, Saturday morning. We'll keep you up to date on that. Delbert Hosemann is the Lieutenant Governor. He is with us. I'm going to read you this text as a starting point for our conversation about education.
Okay.
Universal school choice. The only thing about education many of us want to hear about. Not how much more money is being thrown at big government schools to attain nebulous school ratings, which is all schools are concerned with. Competition is good for everything. I got to be honest, there's a lot that he says there that I agree with.
Yeah, of course, and it's what we're on the process for. But I'm going to go back a little bit. When we started, our teachers weren't getting paid.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you can say you're throwing money. No, we had to pay our teachers because they're the people that are standing in front of our children 8 hours, 10 hours, however long it is, or coaching them or whatever they're doing. So we had to bring compensation up. That was job one. Now, you can talk about throwing money, but I don't think teachers are overpaid. So we may just differ on that. So then, and there were some other things. We had to get the buildings up, and we had to get the internet to them, and all that other. There were certain things that needed to be done, and we have done those in the last 5 years that y'all hired me. So then we moved to the second part of this part, which is where we look at the accountability formula and the issues that we have currently. And he's right to that degree. The accountability formula is not sufficient to me, and I have pressed the members of the board and Mr. Evans about changing the accountability formula. And there's some things missing from it, I think.
Not the funding formula, the accountability formula for the way schools are graded.
As I just discussed with you, we redid the funding formula last year. The House and the Senate did, and it funds significant amount of money that's not used for administration. We don't pay administrators. You know, the administrators are paid by the fees that are generated by the Board of Supervisors and the taxes that they levy. We pay the teachers. So when we got this up, we redid the formula to allocate money to schools, and it's very attractive, and we've increased the funds that have gone there, and I think those were appropriate. Then when we looked at the accountability formula over the last 2 years, Richard, there's a big gap. I have been in probably dozens of public schools this last year, and private schools, and Christian schools, and whatever, every kind of school that you can come up with, I've been in them. From Ripley to Van Cleef, I've been in those schools, Brookhaven to Murrah High School here. And as I go in, I discovered that we have a huge absentee rate. Now, we went to 28% absentee rate after COVID for our kids, and that's chronic absenteeism. That means you've missed more than 10% of your days at school. So I started looking at that. We have to get our kids back in school. So I started the Lieutenant Governor's Award for all districts that have 15% or less chronic absenteeism. I gave out 147 out of over 850 schools. So you can see 1 out of every 4 kids is not in school. And we have a huge issue. This year we're gonna increase our what we call truancy officers. We'll move those to the local school districts that were with Department of Education, and we'll pay them more money. They were making $24,000 a year, so we weren't really getting a whole lot of people. And the turnover was huge, and you have to have a college degree. So we'll increase the compensation. We'll put our truancy officers back in, trying to get in touch with this family. Why isn't your child in school? Yeah. The other thing that was staggering to me was that we're not reading very well. Now, if you can't read, nobody's going to be in your chair that can't read, or anybody else's. So,
Lieutenant Governor, we got a minute and a half.
Yeah, and all of those things are being now addressed this year in the accountability formula and the other things that we need. We need to make sure our kids are in school, and I'm asking every one of you that are listening out there that are in the Kiwanis Club or the Rotary Club or in your church or your Christian group, whatever. Find out why a child is not in school and encourage that parent, one way or another, mom, dad, whoever, to get them back to school. And that's a critical component. When we do all of this and change our accountability formula, I think you'll see a lot better. We'll have bills. We'll have bills this year that will allow for complete transfer, no requirements from between any public school in Mississippi. That was put out last year and will be out this year.
Between any public school in Mississippi,
that's
not
correct.
Public to private.
That's correct.
Okay. And I think, honestly, that's the question that people, all of those other things are certainly important. I don't disagree with you on that. But, I mean, that's the answer to the question that people have is, are we going to get school choice? You say the Senate is going to be on the side of you can transfer public to public, and that can happen without restriction, but public to private, where the money follows, is not going to be.
There'll be a restriction on schools that receive you that they have to have the capacity, unless you're in an F school. In an F school, everybody's got to take everybody, and the state will pay the difference in the cost for that, because I don't want to leave our F schools students out there just trying to make up some kind of way. So, yeah, you'll see your transferability will be subject to capacity in the public school system, except if it's an F school, in which case you can transfer and the state will pay the difference.
Mr. Lieutenant Governor, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Rita. I'll look forward to maybe coming back and we can get a chance to explore all the other things we're doing. But we're emphasizing on taxes and schools and education and things we should be doing. The state's in the best financial condition it's ever been in. We've never.
This is the Gallo Radio Show. Thank you, Mr. Hosemann.
Thank you. See you soon.